Welcome to Ask John. John Kaminsky from the Center for the Study of the American Constitution at UW-Madison, thank you for being with us. I'd like to ask you a couple questions about powers. And let's start generally with interpreting the Constitution. What are the methods of interpreting the Constitution? Some have said that there's loose, there's strict. What are those, and what might be the advantages and disadvantages of those methods of interpreting?
Well, if we look at the Articles of Confederation, the second article really is the heart and soul of the Articles of Confederation, and it explicitly states that the states retain their sovereignty, freedom, and independence. None of that is in the Constitution, the new Constitution, and that Congress has only those powers that are expressly delegated to it. Again, that's not in the Constitution, and in fact, it's not even in the article. The 10th Amendment expressly delegated is not there. There is a reference to enumerated powers, but not expressly delegated powers in the 10th Amendment. And so Madison would argue, and did argue in the debate in the Confederation Congress in September 1787, that repeatedly the Confederation Congress violated the Constitution in being the Articles of Confederation because it went to issues that were not expressly delegated to it. One example was the land ordinances of 1785 and 1787. The 1787 ordinance is the Northwest Ordinance. Nowhere in the Articles of Confederation does the Congress have the authority to legislate in that case. Madison said necessity required it. And so this is the case with a number of examples of things that the Confederation Congress did. And Madison suggested that the necessary and proper clause was needed because you could not specify in a constitution all the contingencies that might occur and what the Congress or the president might be forced to do. And so there needed to be a somewhat expansive interpretive capability under the Constitution. Anti-Federalists argued that that was a dangerous thing. It was a very slippery slope. They didn't use that terminology, but that's what we use today. That once you allow Congress to do something, it's a short step for it to do something else. And the arbiter in all of this is going to be the federal judiciary. And the feeling was, everyone knew how the federal judiciary would decide cases, always giving more power to the central government because it would increase the power of the judiciary. And with the increased power of the judiciary, perhaps we'd get the judges would get more salaries as well. And so you could not trust a government that was open-ended. So that's the dichotomy that was there. There was a need for a certain degree of vagueness and a broader interpretation, and the danger that that might well lead to. As the government got started, it didn't take very long before the issue of the interpretation of the Constitution came up. In fact, it's a bit of a surprise that despite the fact that the country was so evenly divided in favor and opposed to the Constitution in the debate in 1788, 1787, 1788, that by 1790, let's say, the Constitution is pretty much viewed as almost a sacred document by almost everyone in the country. The issue then becomes, how is it to be interpreted? And right away, we get a discrepancy over the economic program proposed by Alexander Hamilton, the Secretary of the Treasury. And it's of interest that it's Madison who comes out and states the issue. And he says that there are three different possible interpretations of the Constitution. One is a strict interpretation, and he doesn't buy into that. He says that was the problem that they had under the Articles of Confederation. We don't need to be so strict. But he says what we should do, what we should have, is a natural interpretation of the Constitution. That's what he wanted to put forth. that there are enumerated powers, and only what is absolutely necessary to use to enact those enumerated powers should be available to the Congress of the United States and the President. So they should be limited in their focus by this natural interpretation. What Madison said Hamilton did, he went beyond that, and he used what Madison described as a forced interpretation. Madison described that using that terminology not only in the debates in Congress, but also in the Virginia resolutions of 1798, that Hamilton had gone too far in his economic program, and in fact the Sedition Law of 1798 was again one of these forced constructions of the Constitution that presented certain dangers to the American people.
Well, thank you, John. Hopefully, Emily and Matthew from Arcadia High School, that'll help you sort out the questions that you submitted. Thank you.